It's always nice to hear yourself introduced because you don't even recognize the person that's being introduced. And just to be sure you know something, Norwest was not a subsidiary of Wells Fargo, because if people thought I said that, I would get all kinds of phone calls from the old Norwest people telling me that they were an independent bank and that I should know that. So let me get to this. And I do realize that most of you would rather be in the bar than listening to me talk, but for the next 30, 35 minutes, I want to talk to you about a topic that I think you're going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future. And I'm not going to tell you anything today that you couldn't read or hear from somebody else or probably work on yourself. So my hope is that you'll pick up one or two things out of everything I say that you might could use down the road. The topic today is exponential change. Cotter International says anyone in the business world knows that it's experiencing a rapid rate of change. New companies spring up seemingly overnight, and products, services, and companies that were revolutionary 2 years ago are rendered obsolete if they don't adapt to the market changes that are going on. So my point to you is exponential change is a reality in our world today. We really don't have any idea what's going to happen tomorrow, who's going to be your competition, what the next technology is going to be. Then, if you think about globalization, which I think we are in a global world now, and I think technology is driving us to a place where all the boundaries between countries will be kind of obliterated. You won't even see them anymore, and people will be doing business across continents and everything else. Future predictions are that 3 to 4 billion new mines are coming online in the next several years. There will be 5 billion online by 2020. 80% of the world will have smartphones by 2020. People will be able to know anything, anywhere, anytime. And if you step back and just think how that might change your business, when people will have the technology available to them, that they can know as much about what's going on and what your products and services are as you know when you created them. So why isn't everybody reacting to this change? Well, Scott Brinker, a marketing technologist, said, technology is changing very rapidly, and the change seems to be accelerating. But changing an organization, how it thinks and behaves, is still hard and very slow. Albert A. Bartlett, a noted physics professor, said, the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. And if you think about it, you don't hear much about it. So let's look at what they're talking about. Well, everybody knows that technology is changing every day. Our world changes, we adapt, and we move forward. The problem today is it's changing faster than organizations can adopt it, get it into their planning, and understand what the future is going to look like. More importantly to me, all this technology change that's going on is acting as a catalyst for two other areas. The first is consumer behavior. Many of the experts now think consumer behavior is changing faster than technology. And we're almost to a point where we think that anything we ask for, somebody's going to be able to do and provide for us. Deloitte reports that there's an increasing gap as businesses struggle to keep pace with more informed, more connected, and more demanding customers. And I think there are multiple articles out on the internet that talk about this ever-growing gap between what companies do and what people expect. The second concept I call innovative thinking, but you could also just as easily call it disruptive thinking. People can now use technology to find answers to most of their problems. They're using an abundance of resources, and they're answering all kinds of questions about what's going on in their world, what they want, how they want it. All three of these areas are now feeding off each other. A change in technology spurs a change in consumer behavior. Then two people sit around and think, and they come up with a net new product or a net new service. It's also creating what I like to think of as the ability to be disrupted at any point in time. And you know, we don't have to look very far. Blockbuster, Barnes & Noble, Nokia, Xerox, Compaq, Kodak. You know the list as well as I do of companies who all were at the top of their industries. And because of disruptive change, all of a sudden they're either bankrupt or they've been relegated way down the chain. So the best way I think that any of you can combat this paradigm shift is to really understand each of these changes, think about them, and incorporate them into your organizational thinking. So let's look at each one of them in a little more detail. Oh, wrong way. If you think about technology change, I want to read you a quote from Singularity University. Technology is always over-predicted and at some later time massively over-delivered. It grows exponentially, which makes prediction difficult. Exponential technology change is one of the most devastating and least understood topics in business today. Well, why is that? Well, I want you to take a look at the graph. Do you see the white line? That white line is what we call linear planning. It's additive. Any of you that have been in budget meetings, you sit around and let's project next year. Oh, we're going to project 5% increase or 10% increase. If you think about it, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4. That's the way we plan. Our lives are also linear. Experts say that 90% of our thinking each day is linear. In business, this is ingrained into every company. We do our planning, we do our thinking in a linear fashion. And any of you that have been in planning sessions recognize that white line. And you understand exactly how you go in with your budget every year and present it. It keeps taking the past and projecting the future. Now look at the exponential curve. Looks quite different. If you think about it, everybody's heard of Moore's Law. You know, Moore said that the number of transistors on a circuit would double every year for the next 10 years. We've now converted that into a little different thinking, computer power per dollar that doubles. Any way you look at it, this exponential change means the following. Each time step is double the previous generation. And as you can see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, 32, 64. That's exponential change. And that's what's going on in the technology world today. The knee of the curve is where all of a sudden, for some reason, that technology starts to accelerate. Somebody develops something, some company comes out with something. And when that acceleration starts, the curve goes up exponentially. Now, I want you just to imagine if you are a linear planning company, planning on that white line, and all of a sudden your industry or your company gets hit with exponential change, and all of a sudden things are changing 64 times, and you're planning for 7. There's going to be some kind of disruption that's going to happen in that scenario. Disrupt or be disrupted, the venture capitalist Josh Linker warns in his book, The Road to Reinvention. He argues that fickle consumer trends, friction-free markets, along with the dizzying speed, exponential complexity, and mind-numbing technology advances, means the time has come to panic like you never panicked before. Now, I don't totally agree with him that we ought to all go panic, but I will tell you, his message there that somebody needs to take action and do something and stay on top of this, I think is right on track. Well, let me give you an example that I think could have some relevance to financial services today. And I know you've heard this story before, so bear with me. Everyone cites Kodak as a prime example of innovative incompetence. It was a poster child for technology for a number of years. Kodak employee Steve Sasson invents a digital camera in 1975. He takes that to senior management and the board of Kodak. At that time, Kodak had a 90% market share in film sales and 85% in camera sales. Both those products were analog products with very high margins. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the board and senior management did. They told him to put the camera away. He did. In 1981, 6 years later, Sony comes along and introduces a digital camera, and Kodak's world begins to crumble. When they realized what was happening, they decided they needed to do a digital transformation. They shuttered plants, laid off thousands of workers. Their entire focus of the company was on digital transformation. By 2005, they had become number one in digital camera sales, and they were a printing powerhouse. They basically disrupted their analog business and become digital. In 2005, they had become one of the most written about companies in our country. In 2012, they declared bankruptcy. Well, what happened? A lot of things happened to that company, and if you'll bear with me, I'm going to tell you later one of the things that happened to them that you should be aware of and think about. If you think about Kodak's strategy, we need to take analog and convert it to digital. Do you see any similarities to financial services? Are banks, insurance companies, and investment companies all racing to become digital, converting analog data to digital, making products and services more mobile? Well, whether it's analog photography or analog data, becoming digital and doing that transformation consumes time, money, and more importantly, focus. And that's what Kodak did. They took their time, their money, and their focus, and they put it all on digital. One CEO told me, we have focused our digital on our digital presence, and more did say that the exponential curve that you see there would eventually level off and become less disruptive. Webb, maybe we've weathered the storm. Well, let me tell you, I don't believe you weathered the storm. And if we really think about what's going on, if we can get this to go to the next slide. Moore's right. This curve will eventually level off. But if we broaden our thinking, I want to read something that Peter Diamandis from Singularity University said. He points out that there are an abundance of new technologies riding on the old exponential technology curve. They are creating new exponential curves. All of them are creating a world where the impossible is becoming possible. Even more devastating is that they are available to everyone. Anyone can now be a creator as well as a user. If you think about the advances in AI, in robotics, cloud computing, virtual reality, bots, and many other new technologies, all of these are creating their own exponential curves. And they're all creating new ways for people to disrupt old businesses I'm a little interested in bots, very new technology. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. They're agents that will simulate human behavior. Now, they're on the very leading edge. The early bots aren't going to be what bots are going to look like down the road. But we're going to have technology that can simulate human behavior. And those bots will be servicing consumers out there. And all they'll do is go to a bot and ask for something, and the AI technology embedded in that will get it for them. Facebook's a believer, and all of you have seen they've enabled Messenger to have a bot library for consumer use. Then think about virtual reality. A recent USA article said reality has a stalker. Its name is virtual reality. From Time. Google is going all in on virtual reality with its announcement of Daydream. The University of Cambridge says 3D printing and digital fabrication is the underpinning for a manufacturing revolution. Now, if you're familiar with those technologies, imagine as they develop and people can now create things outside of plants, outside of large manufacturing. How's that going to disrupt your business when many of these companies are going to have to reinvent themselves because people aren't going to buy those products anymore, they're going to create their own. You know, if you think about this kind of change, it's not going to go away. The world is just going to become more connected, and these technologies are going to make us all more powerful as we go forward. Well, the second piece of this is behavior change. Many people think behavior is now changing faster than technology. All of you read and work on big data, and I'm intrigued by how big data is going to help companies. Well, let me give you the other side of that. Big data is also going to lead to significant changes in consumer behavior because that same data is going to be available to them, and many people are now putting it in a format that allows them to take that data and use it. Customers can now pretty much find what they want the moment they want it. If you look at recommendation systems, all of you know what they are. These systems are teaching consumers new ways to solve their problems. A recent study found that 65% of millennials and 60% of boomers use Amazon when thinking about where and what to buy. Now imagine that. Amazon has created a world where consumers now go there to their recommendation system to determine what they're going to buy. These are all changes that we're seeing every day in our lives. In another study by Qualcomm, 1/3 of Americans, I hope none of you are in this, 1/3 of Americans said that their phone was the last thing they look at night and the first thing they look at in the morning when they get up. Now, why is that important? Well, the phone's no longer just for messages, as you well know. It's now a multi-purpose engine. 63% of adults with a phone use it as a primary device today to get to the internet and to go online. Google reports that 83% of U.S. consumers research products on their phone while in the store. People are becoming less and less afraid of person-to-person transactions. You all read about these companies that are springing up, whether they're lending companies or others, where somebody has built a technology platform that sits in the middle and it connects two people to do a transaction. That's going to grow. Early adapters will try anything they find interesting these days. Problem is figuring out what they're going to find interesting. Fortune magazine says now self-image, social factors, imitation, and an abundance of information all play a role in behavior change. Information equals relevance in today's world. People can't get enough of it, especially if it's personalized for them. And that's going to become more and more of a differentiator in the market, in my opinion. Behavior has become much more complex and instantaneous. consumers now have no problem going to social media if you screw up. Nor do they have any problem going to social media if you do something that they like. But you can bet that the old word of mouth that we used to talk about, it's not word of mouth anymore, it's one to thousands. Because once you put it out there, it takes a life of its own. Behavior across the board now dictates that our technology and our products need to be easy to use, self-directed, comprehensive, and personalized. Those are common characteristics people expect across all generations of people. So, innovative thinking is the third part of this. And I think the rapid change in technology and behavior is creating a world where resources and the utilization of those is going to be available to anyone. Anyone with an idea can find a way to create a new product, a new service, or a new business. One of my favorite quotes, innovative thinking starts with big thoughts that turn into big ideas, that turn into small starts, that can then turn into big businesses. And that's really the definition of what I call innovative thinking. If you look at what goes on, when people come out with a new product and call it 1.0, is that a finished product these days? No. They know it's not a finished product. They get it out there, they let people tell them what's wrong with it, and what do? They create 2.0, 3.0, and it just keeps growing and expanding. Think about Uber and Airbnb. Two real good examples of this. Certify says that Uber controls 46% of total rides in most major cities, other than Austin, Texas. Airbnb, that basically rents couches and beds to vacationers, now has a market cap of $24 billion. That is slightly bigger than Marriott. Now, these companies didn't go out and build expensive infrastructure. They didn't hire tons of people. They used what was available, used technology and its changing ways, and they created a platform to connect people. I will tell you that I think we're going to see more and more of that as we go forward. An article from TEF, which is the Emerging Future, states, exponential growth has now entered the phase of instant personalized products and services that removes the need for most management, large numbers of employees, real estate, and production cost. Now, I don't know the timing. I don't know whether we're there or we'll be there in 5 years. But I will tell you directionally, what they are saying in that article is exactly where we're headed with all the change that's going on in our world. I told a retail banking head that the ability to think and plan exponentially could turn the change from a disaster into an opportunity. I even made a little smart comment to this person. I said, you got to remember that Noah built the ark way before it started raining. Maybe you should take the same philosophy. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He looked at me and said, we don't want to divert our people from our core competency, but we'll keep it on the agenda. Now, folks, I want to tell you, I believe the person that told me that is very smart and very successful. But if you believe your core competency today is going to be your core competency tomorrow, you're going to be very disappointed going down the road. Accenture reported that 73% of executives said that consumer behavior has changed. 74% said they did not understand the changes going on with consumers. Worse, 80% said that their company is not taking advantage of the new opportunities. That should probably scare all of us. And my question to you, are you thinking exponentially by considering technology and behavior change and developing new ways to capitalize on those changes and be the disruptor not the disrupted? If you haven't, I will stand here today and bet you that there's somebody out there today that is thinking about how to disrupt your business. If I were you and I didn't have it, I'd find me a group of people, I would hire them, and I would dedicate them to research. They'd be out on the internet every day looking at everything that's going on, everything that's being created, how it has relevance to my industry. And it would be the best money that you could spend in today's world, in my opinion. Well, something for you to think about and ask yourself. Are we really, in financial services, condoning institutional blindness, which a lot of people think we are? Many so-called experts seem to believe that we're letting institutional blindness hold us back from making the change that we should make. They say real change is moving too slow and it is still outside the culture of most organizations. Most still don't understand how fast change is happening, and worse, don't see it as a threat to their company. Now, I don't know the reasons. You can go out on the internet and you can read numerous articles by very smart people that will tell you it's uncertainty. Maybe it's fixed asset write-offs affecting quarterly earnings. Maybe it's regulatory action. There are so many opinions out there as to why financial services is not moving faster. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I don't know if you're moving fast enough or not fast enough. But I will tell you, it is something that we ought to all be watching. Experts say, turn your company around and make it exponential versus linear. Well, I will tell you, I don't believe that's possible. You're not going to turn a company around and change tradition and history overnight. If I were you, I'd be looking at what are the areas that are most threatened in my business. Where am I likely to be disrupted? And I would pick those areas and I'd go to work on them. And if I was successful there, I'd move on and work on the next set of areas. But you're not going to turn a company around with a 100-year history and make it exponential overnight. It's got to be done in steps. If I were banks, I would be spending a lot of time looking at transfer services and payments. It doesn't take a genius to go out on the internet and look at all the payment companies and opportunities that are out there. There are many of them, and they're growing exponentially, I might add. If I was in insurance and investment, I'd be adopting a strategy of simplification and generational targeting. Now, anybody that's ever gone out and bought insurance, it can be one of the most complex things that you go through and the hardest to understand. Simplify. Adapt it to the generations. A Forbes article states that companies that simplified the decision-making process for their customers were 86% more likely to make a sale. That would be pretty compelling for me. Surviving and prospering in this new paradigm requires time and a big attitude change. Well, let me end by giving you 3 areas that, if I were you, I would be thinking about. The first is I want to ask you a question. Could it be that we're missing the fact that financial services is fast becoming something you do, not somewhere you go? Something you do, not somewhere you go. If that's true, it means you need to rethink your value proposition. So let me give you 3 things that I would do if I was rethinking my value proposition in financial services. And I want to start with a little banking analogy. I read a summary. It goes as follows. Today, banks have 90,000 retail branches. Transaction volume has declined 56% from 2006 to 2015. 70 to 80% of all transactions can now be done outside the branch. Only the most complicated products and services require in-person help. Now let me give you a contrast to that. Has everybody in here heard of Apple? Apple has 479 retail stores in 18 countries. 479 stores in 18 countries. They're a great example of a contemporary digital company that is also using old brick and mortar architecture to broaden the value to their customers. And they do it well. They put their stores in locations that appeal to customers that want in-store interaction. They don't go by markets or generations. They figure out which people. Is it the upscale buyer? Who is it that wants to come into the store? And that's the cities they put their stores in. Go look at San Francisco. See how many stores they have in San Francisco. They really think about marketing strategy and how the world's changing and how you blend the old and the new. By the way, those Apple stores generate more revenue per square foot than any other retail company. And it's not just a little, it's by a mile. Go figure out, if you're in the banking business, how much you make per square foot for those 90,000 retail branches that sit out there. Second, I would become more of a tech company. Now, I know that's heresy if you're on the business side of banking, because technology is one of those things that is a means to the end. But that's not true today. An article from Business Standard says technology has always been considered a backroom operation, but today banks must become a technology company with a banking license. I totally agree with that. Technology has to move to the forefront if you're going to play in this digital world. We're now in a technology-driven world where information is the currency, and personalized information is of high value. Technology is no longer just an expense item. It's now the key to future revenue growth, in my opinion. It's also the key to attracting this broad mix of consumers that we're talking about. According to a mobile behavior report, 91% of consumers indicated that instant access to all my personalized information across all my devices is very important in my decision about who I do business with. The only way to deliver that kind of experience is to develop an omni-channel strategy with real-time delivery. I will predict that over the next 5 years, many of these batch-oriented systems that we have today are going to be obsoleted. They're going to be worthless. They're not real-time. If you consider how do you move technology to the revenue side of the equation, I think it's going to take some work on every CIO's part. You have to start by convincing senior management. You have to convince the board. It takes a lot of effort, and I think that's one of the reasons that not many people are doing it right now. You know, the only way to really achieve that in our lifetime is to accept technology as a new revenue generator and get away from treating it as an expense to be controlled every year and the first thing that gets cut when things are a little tight. Finally, I'd be watching blockchain. All of you know what it is. I didn't say Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just one thing that's spinning off. Blockchain is a platform. And it is the platform, the kind of platform we've been talking about. It sits there and it connects people together. It's going to grow. It's going to get better. I'm sure that anybody from MasterCard, I'm looking at my friend over here on the side, is keeping up with everything blockchain does. And I don't know whether they'll build something similar or they will get on that bandwagon, but I can tell you, you better watch blockchain. You better know who's building around it and what they're doing and what it's likely to do to your businesses. Well, after rethinking your value proposition, I would rethink my ecosystem. Much of today's disruption is not happening at the product or service level, it's happening at the eco level. An ecosystem is defined as a network of interlinked companies, such as suppliers and distributors, who interact with each other to supply key parts of the value proposition. So let me take you back to our discussion of Kodak. If you remember, they had done their digital transformation, they had moved up the chain again, and then they declared bankruptcy. What happened? They had been so focused on that digital transformation, they forgot to look around at what was going on in their ecosystem. What are other people doing? How might we be disrupted? They totally overlooked it. They failed to see the exponential change happening in 3 areas that gave rise to digital cameras and digital printing. Sony never gave up on creating charge-coupled devices. They made them smaller, cheaper. They made them where they could mass produce them. And then they put them into phones. Hitachi and Samsung and Toshiba were all evolving LCD screens and getting the quality of the picture better and better and better. Those 2 technologies and the change they brought about eliminated the market for digital cameras. Along with that, all of you know that storage became cheaper. You could store more. Now people were putting more and more pictures on their phone. The quality was good. What happened to digital printing? People quit printing their pictures. Kodak's blind spot was not thinking about the progress in other parts of their ecosystem and not watching what other people were doing. They never even anticipated a game-changing technology evolution that basically caught up with them. There's so much going on in your world of financial services, it would be very easy for you to lose track of what's going on in your ecosystem. What are other people doing? Who's partnering with who? If I might use an example, if MasterCard partners with Facebook and Twitter for payments, what might that do to you? You have to watch that ecosystem. You have to watch what, I'm not picking on you, you're just a great example, I'm sorry. You have to watch that ecosystem. You have to know what other people are doing. I find that many companies don't even have a chart that depicts their ecosystem. Who are those people out there that you do business with that add to your value proposition? What are they doing? Well, if you don't know who they are, you sure as hell won't know what they're doing. So I would encourage all of you, go look at your ecosystem. Know your customer and use your data. For the first time in history, you're going to be serving 5 generations. Jason Dorsey, who's a generational speaker, said, strategies that identify with one generation can completely turn off another. Never before has one generation's buying hot buttons been another generation's instant turnoffs. Are you set up to identify the hot buttons and the turnoffs of each of these generations? Is your data segmented and packed with intelligence so you can differentiate and appeal to each of those generations? As you can see, millennials have now become the largest generation. They're concentrated very heavily in 4 states, California, Utah, Texas, and Washington, D.C. Now, there's millennials everywhere, so I understand that, but they are concentrated in those states. Millennials say that marketing that doesn't recognize that social media can foster meaningful connections and that face-to-face is not necessary does not appeal to them. That's the largest generation telling all of us how they feel about the way we market. They also say that you can't slap old school approaches onto new media and impress them. Is your marketing targeted for where millennials are located? Does it recognize their preferences? More than 50% of boomers are currently dissatisfied or less than satisfied with the financial services they are receiving. If we could change that one thing, it could mean $82 billion in deposits and $443 billion in investable assets that could come into the industry. But you can't do that if half of them are not satisfied with what they're getting today. My point is that when you examine experience, ideas, and values, this complex combination of things, decision criteria and for buying and who you do business with has become really important. Marketing strategies and the sporting technology have to be dramatically different. You have to have the ability to segment by generation and really understand what each of these are looking for. And finally, make human capital a priority. Understand the dynamics of the changing labor force. Again, you're going to be dealing with 5 generations. Of equal importance is that every company is reporting today that there's a growing gap between skills needed and skills available. And that's only going to get worse. As you can see from the slide, millennials will be the dominant talent pool. Census numbers say they'll be 50% of the workforce by 2020. Are you ready to train them using virtual reality? You willing to accept their ideas that may go against the traditions of your company? Are your Gen X leaders ready to lead millennials, boomers, and the new generation? Are you teaching them how to build cohesive teams with different generations in the workforce? Scott Tapscott, author and consultant, says, the yet-to-be-named generation will be the first to know more than their parents about something that is vitally important: technology. Now, how important is that? Have you heard of reverse mentoring? Reverse mentoring is going on in Silicon Valley today because the competition for young talent that brings new ideas to the table is so intense that they're now recruiting 13-year-olds to come in and help them understand what this new generation's thinking. Facebook flies the parents and the kids in to talk to Zuckerberg. They're getting ahead of the curve. They understand. Now, unfortunately, all these generations have very different views on work ethic, careers, work-life balance, and each other. According to a recent CIO study, relations among the generations seems to be at a low point. Gen Y, millennials, think Gen X are a bunch of whiners. Gen X sees Gen Y as arrogant and entitled. Boomers think the younger generations don't have a good work ethic. Everyone thinks baby boomers are self-absorbed workaholics. I believe the challenge can be summed up 2 ways. You have to first think about how you're going to bring those people in that all have different ideas, different beliefs, different ways of doing things, and blend them into a cohesive unit. You have to capitalize on the things that are alike and minimize the differences. That takes a lot of work to think that through and to understand what it might do. Second, can you compete for a significantly reduced labor force? The gap we talk about between skills available and skills needed, I think is going to get bigger and bigger. I think the competition for talent, especially in the IT area, is going to get very intense. Unfortunately, making and matching the future human resource requirements is not something that most companies do very well. A survey by the Conference Board found out that 1/3 of companies said they effectively assess human capital risk. I hope all of you are in that third. To me, planning for this type of change in the labor force ought to be a bored down process. Everybody ought to be involved in thinking this through. Well, I want to end with my favorite quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change an organization. Look around, because it is the only thing that ever has. And the only question you have to answer is, are you up for the challenge? Thank you very much.
Thank you again very much for a fantastic and thought-provoking keynote, Webb Edwards. Just letting everyone know, the next session starts at 3:55, which is 6 minutes from now. It's down the other side of the lobby. It's the Majorca room, which outside the Majorca room is also where our help desk is. Again, if you need anything. Any one of the Millennium Alliances has a red lanyard, so please ask us any questions or if you need any assistance. Have a fantastic and productive afternoon.